The old barn had become his sanctuary. Every evening, Alex would climb the creaky wooden stairs to his makeshift art studio, leaving behind the world of deadlines and phone calls. Tonight was no different, except for the storm that had been building all afternoon. Rain hammered against the metal roof like tiny drums, creating a rhythm that somehow helped him focus. He stood before his easel, paintbrush loaded with deep blue paint, trying to capture the feeling of longing that had been haunting him for weeks. The canvas showed rolling hills under a moody sky, but something was missing. He stepped back, studying the brushstrokes, when he heard it. The soft groan of the barn door opening downstairs. Alex froze. His heart skipped a beat. Nobody knew about this place except his girlfriend, and she was away on a business trip until next week. The nearest neighbor lived miles away, and the storm had knocked out cell service hours ago. He set down his brush carefully, listening to the gentle footsteps on the wooden floor below. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the large space. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. Then slowly, they started moving toward the stairs. Each creak of the old wood made Alex's pulse quicken. He grabbed a palette knife from his art supplies. Not much of a weapon, but it made him feel slightly better. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs, and Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was Lisa, a woman he had met 3 years ago, at an art gallery opening in the city. She had been standing alone in front of a painting, studying it with the kind of intensity that made Alex curious. They had talked for maybe 20 minutes about art, life, and dreams before she disappeared into the crowd. He had thought about that conversation many times since. Now here she was, standing in his private studio, her dark hair wet from the rain, droplets still clinging to her coat. Her eyes were the same warm brown he remembered, but there was something different about her now. A quiet confidence that made the air in the room feel charged. "I'm sorry for coming here without calling," she said softly, her voice carrying a slight smile. "My car broke down about a mile from here. I remembered you mentioning this place that night at the gallery." Alex lowered the palette knife, feeling foolish for being so defensive. "Of course, no problem. Are you okay? The storm is getting worse." She nodded, stepping further into the studio. Her eyes moved across his paintings, dozens of them leaning against the walls, some finished, others abandoned halfway through. She studied each one with the same intense focus he remembered from that night at the gallery. "These are beautiful," she whispered, moving closer to a landscape he had painted last month. "They're so full of emotion. I can feel what you were feeling when you painted them." Something in her tone made Alex's chest tighten. Most people looked at his art politely, nodded, and moved on. But Lisa saw something deeper, something that even he wasn't always sure was there. The rain continued to pound the roof above them, and Lisa shivered slightly in her wet coat. Without thinking, Alex moved toward her. "You must be freezing. Let me get you something dry to wear." She turned to face him, and that's when she smiled, the same knowing smile that had captivated him 3 years ago. But this time, it held something more. It was as if she could see right through him, past all his doubts and fears, straight to the part of him that dreamed of creating something truly meaningful. "Actually," she said quietly, beginning to unbutton her wet coat, "I think I'll be fine." The coat slipped from her shoulders and fell to the wooden floor with a soft thud. Her sweater followed, then her shoes. Each piece of clothing seemed to fall away naturally, without hurry or shame. She moved with the grace of someone completely comfortable in her own skin. Someone who had never learned to doubt herself the way Alex had learned to doubt everything. Alex stood frozen, his mind racing. This wasn't how these things happened in real life. Beautiful women didn't just appear in your private studio during storms and look at you like you were the only person in the world who mattered. But here she was, and her smile never wavered. It was warm, genuine, and somehow familiar, as if this moment had always been waiting to happen. "I've been thinking about our conversation that night," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "About what you said regarding art being the only honest thing left in the world. I couldn't stop thinking about it or about you." The painting behind Alex, the one he had been struggling with all evening, suddenly seemed to make perfect sense. The longing he had been trying to capture, the emptiness he couldn't quite put into words, it was all leading to this moment. To her. Thunder rolled across the sky, and the lights in the studio flickered. In that brief moment of near darkness, with the storm raging outside, and Lisa standing there smiling at him like she had always belonged in his world, Alex felt something shift inside him. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely unexpected. His safe, predictable life suddenly felt like a story someone else had written for him. But this felt real. This felt like the beginning of something he had been waiting for without even knowing it. The storm showed no signs of stopping, and Alex found himself hoping it never would. 3 days had passed since Lisa arrived, and Alex's world had turned upside down in the most beautiful way possible. She moved through his space like she had always belonged there, making coffee in the morning with beans she somehow found in his nearly empty kitchen, humming melodies that seemed to unlock colors in his paintings he never knew existed. Every morning Alex would wake up expecting her to be gone, expecting this dream to end. But there she would be, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. She never asked permission for anything, never acted like a guest. She simply existed in his space as naturally as the morning light. "You paint like someone who's afraid," she said on the third morning, standing behind him as he worked on a new canvas. Her words weren't meant to hurt, but they hit him like a punch to the chest. "What do you mean?" he asked, not turning around, his brush frozen mid-stroke. "Look at your brushstrokes. They're careful, calculated. You're painting what you think people want to see, not what you feel." She moved closer, her presence warm behind him. "But in your sketches, the ones scattered around the room, those are different. Those are honest." Alex glanced at the sketches she meant. They were rough, unfinished drawings he made when he couldn't sleep, when emotions poured out of him faster than he could control. He never showed those to anyone. They were too raw, too real. "Those aren't for anyone else," he mumbled. "Maybe that's the problem," Lisa said softly. "Maybe you've forgotten that art isn't about pleasing everyone else. It's about telling the truth, even when the truth is messy." She was right, and he knew it. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped painting for himself and started painting for approval, for sales, for the safe comfort of making art that wouldn't challenge anyone. But watching Lisa move through his studio, seeing how she looked at his work with such intensity, made him remember why he had started painting in the first place. That afternoon, his phone buzzed with a text from his girlfriend Kate. She was supposed to return from her business trip in 4 days, and the message was full of excitement about seeing him again, about the dinner reservations she had made, about getting back to their routine. Alex stared at the message for a long time, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could he possibly say? How could he explain that everything had changed without explaining anything at all? Kate was a good person, kind and supportive. She deserved better than the comfortable, half-hearted love he had been giving her. Lisa noticed his mood shift immediately. She had been arranging wildflowers she had picked that morning, creating a still life that somehow looked like poetry made visible. "Everything okay?" she asked, not looking up from her arrangement. "My girlfriend is coming back soon," Alex said, the words feeling heavy in his mouth. Lisa nodded slowly, her hands never stopping their gentle work with the flowers. "Do you love her?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Alex wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that what he felt for Kate was love. But sitting here, watching Lisa create beauty from simple wildflowers, feeling more alive than he had in years, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. "I thought I did," he whispered, "but I think I was just comfortable, safe." "Safe is overrated," Lisa said, finally looking up at him with those warm brown eyes. "Safe doesn't make art. Safe doesn't make you feel like your heart might explode from too much feeling." That night they painted together. Alex pulled out his roughest sketches, the ones that scared him with their honesty, and began transferring them to canvas. Lisa worked with clay she had found in his supplies, her hands shaping figures that seemed to capture emotions he didn't even have words for. They didn't talk much as they worked, but the silence was full of understanding. The storm outside had passed, but something electric remained in the air between them, something that made Alex's hands shake as he painted and his heart race like he was running toward something wonderful and terrifying. On the fifth night, as they sat by the fireplace, sharing a bottle of wine Alex had been saving for a special occasion, Lisa finally told him why she had really come. "I need to be honest with you about something," she said, her voice softer than usual. The firelight danced across her face, making her look like something from a dream. "I didn't just happen to break down near your place." Alex felt his stomach drop, but he stayed quiet, letting her continue. "I've been following your work for 2 years," she admitted, turning the wine glass in her hands. "Not in a creepy way, but I saw some of your paintings online, and they spoke to me in a way that art rarely does. Then I started looking for more of your work, and I found your real paintings, the ones you don't show in galleries." "How did you find those?" Alex asked, genuinely curious. Lisa smiled, that same knowing smile from the first night. "You posted photos of them on an old art blog years ago, then took them down. But the internet remembers everything. Those paintings, Alex, they're what real art looks like. They're what I've been searching for my entire life." She pulled out her phone and showed him photos that made his breath catch. Sculptures, dozens of them, created with a skill and passion that made his chest tight with recognition. Figures caught in moments of pure emotion, faces that seemed to hold entire stories, hands that reached for something just beyond their grasp. "You made these?" he whispered, scrolling through image after image of breathtaking work. "I'm a sculptor," she said simply. "I work mostly in clay and bronze. I've been creating these pieces for the past 5 years, trying to capture what it feels like to be human, to feel everything so deeply it hurts." Alex stared at the sculptures on the small screen. They were incredible, the kind of art that changed, people that made them feel less alone in the world. But more than that, they seemed to be having a conversation with his own work, answering questions his paintings had been asking without him realizing it. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "Because I wanted to see if what I felt in your work was real," she said, setting down her wine glass. "I wanted to know if you were still that person who created those honest, heartbreaking paintings, or if you had given up on that part of yourself." "And what did you find?" Lisa stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the clear night sky. The storm had passed completely now, leaving behind a world that looked washed clean and new. "I found someone who's been hiding from his own talent," she said without turning around. "Someone who's been so afraid of failing that he's forgotten how to try. But I also found someone who still has that fire inside him, buried under years of playing it safe." Alex joined her at the window. Outside, the moon was full and bright, casting everything in silver light. He could see his reflection in the glass, but he could also see Lisa's, and together they looked like two people on the edge of something important. "What happens now?" he asked. Lisa turned to face him, her eyes serious but hopeful. "Now you decide who you want to be. The artist, who plays it safe, or the one who creates something that matters." That night, they worked until dawn, creating pieces that seemed to pour directly from their souls onto canvas and clay. Alex painted with a freedom he had forgotten existed, while Lisa shaped figures that seemed to dance with his brushstrokes across the room. As the sun rose over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and promise, Alex realized that Lisa hadn't just found his art. She had found him, the person he had buried under years of doubt and compromise. And for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The sound of a car door slamming cut through the morning air like a knife. Alex's blood turned to ice as he recognized the engine sound, Kate's little blue sedan, arriving 2 days earlier than expected. He had been so lost in his work, so consumed by the world he and Lisa had created together, that he had forgotten to check his phone for messages. Lisa was across the studio, putting finishing touches on a clay sculpture that seemed to capture the exact moment when hope transforms into certainty. She looked up at the sound, her hand stilling on the wet clay, her eyes meeting his with understanding and something that might have been sadness. "She's here," Alex whispered, though they both already knew. Footsteps on the wooden stairs echoed, like a countdown. Alex's heart hammered against his ribs as he looked around the studio. Paintings everywhere, some still wet from the night's work. Lisa's sculptures scattered around like evidence of dreams made real. There was no hiding what had happened here, no pretending this was anything other than what it was. Kate appeared at the top of the stairs, her business suit wrinkled from travel, her hair pulled back in the practical ponytail she always wore for long trips. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes moving from Alex to Lisa to the art that filled every corner of the room. "I tried calling," she said quietly, her voice carefully controlled. "Your phone went straight to voicemail." Alex realized he hadn't even thought about his phone in days. It was probably dead, buried somewhere under sketches and paint tubes. "Kate, I can explain." "Can you?" she interrupted, stepping further into the room. Her eyes were taking in everything. The paintings that looked nothing like his usual work, the sculptures that seemed to pulse with life, the way Lisa stood, so naturally in his space like she belonged there. Lisa stepped forward, her hand still covered in clay. "I'm Lisa," she said simply, "and you must be Kate. Alex has told me about you." Kate's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Has he? That's interesting, because he hasn't told me anything about you." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Alex wanted to say something, anything, to make this easier, but every word that came to mind felt like a lie. The truth was too big, too complicated, too raw to explain in a way that wouldn't hurt everyone involved. Kate walked slowly through the studio, stopping in front of a painting Alex had finished just hours before. It showed two figures reaching for each other across a vast space, their hands almost touching, the colors bleeding from one figure into the other until they became part of the same story. "This is different from your other work," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's alive." Alex watched her study the painting, seeing her really look at his art maybe for the first time in their 2 years together. Kate had always been supportive of his painting, but in the way someone supports a pleasant hobby, she had never seen it as the essential part of him it really was. "Kate," Alex started, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I can see it in your face," she said, turning away from the painting to look at him directly. "You're different. More like the person you were when we first met, before you got so careful about everything." Lisa had remained quiet through the exchange, but now she spoke up. "This isn't Alex's fault," she said. "I came here uninvited. I pursued something that I had no right to pursue. If you're going to be angry at someone, be angry at me." Kate studied Lisa for a long moment, taking in the clay-stained hands, the intense eyes, the way she stood like someone who had never learned to apologize for taking up space in the world. "You're an artist too," Kate said. It wasn't a question. Lisa nodded. "I am. And you understand something about him that I don't." Another nod, this one more hesitant. Kate looked around the studio one more time, her gaze lingering on the collaborative pieces that seemed to tell a story of two souls finding each other through their art. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but sad. "I always wondered why you seemed to be holding back something," she said to Alex. "Why you painted pretty landscapes instead of the things that kept you up at night. Why you were always so careful, so safe." Alex felt tears burning behind his eyes. "Kate, I never meant for this to happen." "I know," she said softly, "but it did happen. And honestly, looking at these paintings, seeing you like this, I think maybe it needed to happen." She picked up her purse from where she had dropped it by the stairs. "I'm going to go pack my things from your apartment," she said. "I think we both know this has been coming for a while." As she reached the stairs, she turned back one more time. "Take care of him," she said to Lisa. "He's got more talent than he knows what to do with, but he's also got more fear than is good for him." Lisa nodded solemnly. "I will." After Kate's footsteps faded and her car pulled away, Alex and Lisa stood in the sudden quiet of the studio. The morning light streaming through the windows illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, making everything look dreamlike and fragile. "Are you okay?" Lisa asked. Alex looked around at the art they had created together. at the evidence of the most honest week of his life, and realized that despite the pain of hurting Kate, despite the fear of what came next, he felt more whole than he had in years. "I think I am," he said. 6 months later, Alex stood in a gallery in the heart of the city, watching people move through the space like streams of water finding their way around stones. The walls were covered with paintings and sculptures that told a story of transformation, of two artists finding their voices by finding each other. The exhibition was called Conversations in Clay and Color, and it had drawn attention from art critics and collectors from across the country. But what mattered most to Alex were the faces of the people viewing the work, the way they stopped in front of certain pieces, the way their eyes widened with recognition, the way they seemed to find something in his paintings and Lisa's sculptures that spoke to their own hidden truths. "That one there," Lisa said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee from the gallery's reception table. She nodded toward a couple standing in front of one of Alex's paintings, a swirling mass of blues and golds that captured the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump. Alex watched the couple discuss the painting in hushed voices, their hands finding each other as they talked. The woman had tears in her eyes, and the man kept glancing at her with the kind of look that suggested they were talking about more than just art. "They're having their own conversation," Alex said, understanding what Lisa meant. "That's what good art does," she replied. "It gives people permission to feel things they didn't know they were allowed to feel." The opening night had been a success beyond anything Alex had imagined possible. 3 paintings had sold. 2 of Lisa's sculptures had been purchased by a private collector, and several gallery owners from other cities had expressed interest in bringing the exhibition to their spaces. But more than the sales or the critical attention, what amazed Alex was how natural it all felt. Standing here beside Lisa, watching people connect with their work, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Lisa asked, her voice barely audible over the conversation around them. "When I showed up at your studio?" Alex smiled, remembering the storm, the way she had moved through his space like she belonged there, the way everything had changed in the span of a few heartbeats. "I think about how scared I was," he admitted. "Not of you, but of what you represented. The possibility of actually being the artist I dreamed of being instead of the safe version I had become." Lisa leaned against his shoulder, a gesture so natural it felt like breathing. "I was scared too. I had been searching for so long for someone who understood that art isn't just about making pretty things. It's about telling the truth even when the truth is complicated." Across the gallery, Alex spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. Kate stood near the entrance, studying the exhibition catalog with the careful attention she brought to everything. She looked good, relaxed in a way she hadn't been during their relationship, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a dress he had never seen before. "She came," Lisa said, following his gaze. Alex felt a mix of gratitude and nervousness. He hadn't spoken to Kate since that morning at the studio, though he had sent her an invitation to the opening along with a letter he had struggled over for weeks. Kate looked up and caught his eye across the room. She smiled, not the polite smile of someone making the best of an awkward situation, but a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She raised her hand in a small wave, then pointed to one of his paintings and gave him a thumbs up. The painting she was indicating was one of the first he had created after she left, a piece that captured the complexity of gratitude and loss, the way endings could be sad and necessary at the same time. Seeing her appreciate it, understanding that she recognized the truth in it, filled Alex with a peace he hadn't known he needed. "She looks happy," Lisa observed. "She does," Alex agreed. "I'm glad." As the evening wore on and the gallery slowly emptied, Alex and Lisa found themselves alone with their art, surrounded by the evidence of what they had built together. The paintings and sculptures seemed to glow in the soft lighting, each piece part of a larger conversation about love, art, truth, and the courage it takes to live authentically. "What happens now?" Alex asked, echoing the question Lisa had posed to him months ago. Lisa turned to face him, her eyes holding the same knowing smile that had captivated him that first stormy night. "Now we keep creating," she said. We keep telling the truth. We keep pushing each other to be braver than we think we can be. Alex looked around at their collaborative work, at the life they had built on the foundation of shared creative passion and mutual understanding. It wasn't the safe, predictable life he had been living before, but it was real in a way that made his chest tight with gratitude. Outside, it had started to rain, not the violent storm that had brought Lisa to his door, but a gentle spring, rain that made everything look fresh and new. Through the gallery windows, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered stars. Ready to go home? Lisa asked, gathering her things from behind the reception desk. Home. Alex smiled at the word. Their studio, the one they now shared officially, legally, completely, was waiting for them with half-finished canvases and blocks of clay, ready to be shaped into something beautiful. Always, he said, taking her hand as they walked toward the door, toward the rain, toward whatever masterpiece they would create together next.